Hello, friend. I hope wherever you are right now, you're comfortable. Maybe you're settling in for the evening, the day's work behind you. As always, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment and let me know your corner of this vast planet we share. Tonight, we're going to walk through the darkest chapter of human history together. Not just the battles and generals, though they'll come, but the whole sweep of it. The choices made in smoke-filled rooms, the families torn apart, the cities that burned, and somehow, impossibly, the world that emerged from the ashes. Picture Europe in 1939, late summer, the air still warm. In Paris, couples stroll along the Seine as the sun sets golden over ancient bridges. In London, children play in parks while their mothers chat. In Warsaw, students debate philosophy in cafes thick with cigarette smoke. The world feels solid, permanent. People make plans for next year, for 5 years ahead. They argue about politics, sure. Everyone has opinions about that Austrian fellow shouting in Germany. But war? Real war? That nightmare ended in 1918. Nobody wants to go through that hell again. But beneath this surface calm, something deadly is building. Ancient hatreds mixing with modern grievances. A generation of young men humiliated by the last war, burning for revenge. Technologies of death advancing far beyond anything the previous generation could imagine. And across Europe, across Asia, leaders who believe violence isn't just necessary. It's glorious. What you're about to hear isn't simple. There are no pure heroes, no absolute villains. Just humans making choices. Some brave beyond measure. Others cowardly and cruel. Most somewhere in between, trying to survive something bigger than themselves. This war will kill somewhere between 70 and 85 million people. The exact number? We'll never know. Too many died in places where nobody kept records. Too many vanished without trace. It will redraw the map of the world. It will create weapons that can destroy civilization itself. And it will force humanity to look into a mirror and confront what we're capable of when we abandon every moral limit. By the end, nothing will be the same. Not borders, not governments, not the balance of world power. Not even how we think about right and wrong, about what lines can never be crossed. The world of September 1939 will be gone forever, replaced by something unrecognizable. Our modern world, with all its tensions and alliances, its fears and hopes, was born in these 6 years of mechanized slaughter. So settle in. We have a long journey ahead. I'll be here with you through all of it, every turn in this vast story. And by the end, maybe we'll understand not just what happened, but why it still matters so much today. Why these ghosts still walk among us. Now let's begin. To understand why the Second World War happened, we need to go back to a railway car in a French forest. November 1918. Germany has lost the Great War. Their soldiers are exhausted, their people starving from the British naval blockade. The Kaiser has fled, and now German representatives sit in that railway car, forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. The terms are crushing. Germany must accept sole blame for the war, pay massive reparations to the victors, give up territory where millions of Germans live, reduce their army to a token force, hand over their colonies. The German delegation reads these terms in silence. One of them later writes that he felt like a man condemned to death. Back in Germany, the news hits like a physical blow. Men who fought 4 years in the trenches feel betrayed. The civilians who suffered through the hunger winters feel humiliated. And a dangerous myth begins to spread. The German army wasn't defeated on the battlefield, they say. No, Germany was stabbed in the back by politicians, by Jews, by communists who surrendered when victory was within reach. This lie will poison everything to come. In Italy, the situation is different but equally bitter. Italy fought with the Allies. Their soldiers died by the hundreds of thousands in mountain trenches. But at the peace conference, Italy gets almost nothing. The grand territorial promises made to bring them into the war? Forgotten. Italian nationalists feel cheated, humiliated. They begin talking about restoring the glory of ancient Rome. Meanwhile, across Europe, new nations are carved from the corpses of dead empires. Austria-Hungary is shattered into half a dozen new countries. Poland reappears on the map after more than a century. But these new borders ignore ethnic realities. Germans live in Poland and Czechoslovakia. Hungarians live in Romania. Italians live in Yugoslavia. Everyone has a grievance. In Russia, something even more dramatic is happening. The communist revolution has created the Soviet Union, a vast experiment in remaking human society. The old ruling classes are dead or fled. Millions have died in civil war and famine. And the new Soviet leaders look at capitalist Europe with hatred and contempt, dreaming of revolution spreading worldwide. Japan has its own story. They're a rising power, industrializing rapidly, building a modern military. They fought with the Allies in the Great War but gained little. Now they look at resource-rich China and Southeast Asia and see their destiny. The old European colonial powers look weak. Why shouldn't Japan build an empire too? But the deepest wound is in Germany. Through the 1920s, they struggle. Hyperinflation destroys savings. People carry wheelbarrows of worthless money to buy bread. The middle class is wiped out. Then comes the Great Depression. Millions lose jobs. Banks fail. Families go hungry. And in this chaos, people stop believing in democracy. They want someone strong. Someone who promises to make Germany great again, to avenge the humiliation of Versailles. That someone is waiting. A failed artist. A decorated war veteran. A man with hypnotic speaking ability and absolute certainty in his twisted vision. His name is Adolf Hitler. Picture a beer hall in Munich. November 1923. A short man with a strange mustache climbs onto a table and fires a pistol into the ceiling. He declares the government overthrown. Within hours, his amateur coup collapses. Hitler is arrested, put on trial for treason. He should disappear into obscurity. Instead, he turns his trial into a stage. He doesn't defend himself. He attacks the judges, the government, the Treaty of Versailles. He gives the speech of his life. The judges, sympathetic to nationalism, give him 5 years. He serves 9 months. In prison, he writes a book. Mein Kampf, My Struggle. It's barely readable. A rambling mess of racial theories and grievances. But it lays out his vision with disturbing clarity. Germany needs living space in the East. The Slavic peoples are inferior and must be enslaved. The Jews are a cancer that must be removed. Democracy is weakness. War is natural and necessary. Most people who read it think it's the ranting of a crank. They're catastrophically wrong. Hitler learns from his failed coup. You can't seize power by force in modern Germany. You have to use democracy to destroy democracy. Through the late 1920s, his Nazi party grows slowly. They're a fringe movement, thugs in brown shirts who beat up communists and Jews. Respectable people dismiss them. Then comes 1929. The American stock market crashes. The shockwave hits Germany like a tsunami. American loans that propped up the German economy dry up overnight. Factories close. Banks fail. By 1932, 6 million Germans are unemployed. In every family, someone has lost their job, their savings, their hope. The Weimar Republic, Germany's democratic government, seems helpless. Endless squabbling between parties. Government after government collapsing. Meanwhile, communist and Nazi paramilitaries fight street battles. Democracy appears to be failing, unable to provide either order or prosperity. In this chaos, Hitler's message resonates. He promises jobs, order, national pride, revenge for Versailles. He says the Jews and communists destroyed Germany. He says only he can save it. His rallies are spectacles of light and sound, carefully choreographed to create mass emotion. People who attend describe feeling swept up in something larger than themselves. The establishment thinks they can control him. Conservative politicians believe they can use his popularity while keeping him on a leash. In January 1933, they make the fatal mistake. They appoint Hitler as chancellor. They think he'll be their puppet. Within months, he's consolidated total power. The Reichstag burns, and Hitler blames communists. He demands emergency powers, gets them. Political opponents are arrested. Opposition parties banned. Trade unions crushed. The free press dies. By mid-1933, Germany is a dictatorship. One party, one leader, one will, and Hitler hasn't finished. He begins rearming Germany in violation of Versailles, building tanks, planes, submarines. The other powers protest weakly but do nothing. Britain and France are exhausted from the last war. They desperately want to believe Hitler will be satisfied, that appeasement will work, that there won't be another war. In 1935, Germany openly announces conscription. In 1936, German troops march into the Rhineland, remilitarizing it in violation of treaties. Hitler expects resistance. His generals are terrified. But nothing happens. Britain and France do nothing. Hitler learns a crucial lesson. The democracies are weak. They won't fight. He can take what he wants. Let me tell you what life becomes like inside Nazi Germany. It happens gradually, then suddenly. If you're part of the approved majority, the changes might even feel positive at first. Unemployment drops as massive rearmament and public works projects create jobs. The autobahns stretch across Germany, engineering marvels. There are youth camps and rallies and a sense of national purpose after years of humiliation and chaos. But beneath this surface, something monstrous is growing. The Nuremberg laws in 1935 strip Jews of citizenship. They can't marry non-Jews, can't hold government jobs, can't vote. Signs appear on shops and parks. Jews not welcome. Children are taught in schools that Jews are subhuman, that Slavs are inferior, that Germans are the master race destined to rule. The Gestapo, the secret police are everywhere. Neighbors inform on neighbors. A careless word criticizing the government can mean midnight arrest. People learn to be careful what they say, even to family. Trust erodes. The private sphere shrinks. Everything becomes political. Meanwhile, Hitler is building his war machine. Factories across Germany are producing tanks, aircraft, artillery. Young men are conscripted and trained. The officer corps, initially suspicious of this upstart corporal, is being brought to heel. Generals who resist are dismissed or worse. Military strategy becomes subordinated to ideology. In 1936, Hitler tests the democracies again. In Spain, a civil war erupts between Republicans and nationalists. Hitler sends planes and troops to help the fascist nationalists. So does Mussolini in Italy. The democracies dither and stay out. The Spanish Civil War becomes a testing ground for German weapons and tactics. At Guernica, German bombers deliberately target civilians. The world is horrified. Nothing changes. By 1938, Hitler is ready for his next move. Austria. He wants to unite all Germans under one flag. In March, German troops roll across the border. There's no resistance. Many Austrians cheer. The Anschluss, the union, is complete. Austria ceases to exist. Next comes Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland, the border regions, are home to 3 million Germans. Hitler demands they be given to Germany. The Czech government refuses. War seems imminent. In August 1939, the world receives shocking news. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union have signed a non-aggression pact. These two ideological enemies, who've spent years denouncing each other, are suddenly allies. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact stuns everyone. But there's a secret protocol. Germany and the Soviet Union are dividing Eastern Europe between them. Poland will be split. The Baltic states will go to Stalin. Hitler gets a free hand in the West. Stalin has his reasons. He doesn't trust Britain and France. He thinks they want Germany and the Soviet Union to destroy each other. Better to make a deal with Hitler, buy time, and take territory while Germany fights the West. It's cynical calculation. It's also catastrophically wrong. But for now, it gives Hitler what he needs. No two-front war. On September 1st, 1939, at dawn, German forces invade Poland. It's a new kind of warfare. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Fast-moving tanks punch through defensive lines. Dive bombers scream down on troop concentrations. Mobile infantry follows, encircling entire armies. The Polish army is brave but obsolete. They have cavalry. Germany has panzers. Britain and France demand German withdrawal. Hitler ignores them. On September 3rd, both countries declare war. The Second World War has begun. But neither country attacks. Their armies sit behind the Maginot Line, the chain of fortresses along the French-German border. This is the phony war. War has been declared, but no one is fighting in the West. Meanwhile, Poland is being crushed. From the east, on September 17th, the Soviet Union invades. Poland faces enemies on both sides. Warsaw holds out for weeks, bombed mercilessly. By early October, Poland has fallen. The country is divided between Hitler and Stalin. The Polish government flees into exile. What follows in Poland is darkness. The Nazis begin implementing their racial ideology immediately. The Polish intelligentsia, priests, teachers, professionals are rounded up and shot. The goal is to eliminate anyone who might lead resistance. In the Soviet zone, Stalin does the same thing. In the Katyn Forest, Soviet secret police execute over 20,000 Polish officers. The German plan is audacious. The French expect Germany to attack through Belgium, just like 1914. The Maginot Line covers the direct border, so Belgium is the obvious route. French and British forces move north to meet the attack. It's a trap. The main German thrust comes through the Ardennes, a heavily forested region the French consider impassable for tanks. They're wrong. German panzer divisions, led by generals like Guderian and Rommel, burst through the Ardennes and reach the English Channel in days. The Allied armies in Belgium are cut off. It's military genius. The French command structure collapses in confusion. Orders conflict. Communications break down. Morale shatters. The British Expeditionary Force and French troops are trapped at Dunkirk on the coast. Hitler makes a mysterious decision. He orders his tanks to halt. Maybe he's worried about overextension. Maybe he wants the Luftwaffe to finish them. Maybe he believes the British will negotiate peace. Whatever the reason, it gives the British a chance. Operation Dynamo. Over 9 days, a fleet of warships, fishing boats, pleasure craft, anything that floats, crosses the channel to Dunkirk. Under constant air attack, they evacuate 338,000 soldiers. Most equipment is left behind, but the men are saved. Churchill calls it a miracle. It is, but he's clear. Wars are not won by evacuations. France is collapsing. The government flees Paris. On June 14th, German troops march into the capital. Paris falls without a fight. The French Third Republic is dying. On June 22nd, in the same railway car where Germany surrendered in 1918, France signs an armistice. Hitler makes them sign in that exact spot. Revenge for Versailles. France is divided. Germany occupies the north and west. A collaborationist government under Marshal Pétain controls the south from the town of Vichy. The French Empire remains nominally under Vichy control. One general, Charles de Gaulle, escapes to London and declares he'll continue fighting. Almost nobody takes him seriously. France appears finished. Britain stands alone. Churchill becomes prime minister. His speeches are defiant. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender. But words won't stop panzers. Hitler expects Britain to negotiate. Instead, Churchill rejects. The first weeks of Barbarossa are catastrophic for the Soviet Union. German forces advance at stunning speed. Entire Soviet armies are encircled and destroyed. Thousands of aircraft are destroyed on the ground in the first days. Stalin's purges have decapitated Soviet military leadership. The best generals are dead or in camps. Those remaining are often incompetent or terrified to act without orders. Stalin himself nearly has a breakdown. For days after the invasion, he's paralyzed, unable to function. When he finally acts, his orders are rigid and disastrous. No retreat, no matter the circumstances. Defend everything. The result is massive encirclement battles. At Kiev in September, over 600,000 Soviet soldiers are captured. It's the largest encirclement in military history. The Germans are shocked by Soviet losses and convinced they're winning. Field reports talk about destroying enemy divisions that shouldn't exist because so many have already been destroyed. but Russia is vast. The Soviet Union has reserves, and the resistance is stiffening. German soldiers start writing home about something unexpected. Soviet soldiers aren't surrendering easily. They're fighting with desperate courage. In one case, a single Soviet soldier holds a bridge against an entire company for hours. Stories like this multiply. The Germans expected the Soviet Union to collapse. Instead, it's bending but not breaking. In July, Hitler makes a fateful decision. The original plan focused on Moscow, but Hitler diverts forces south toward Ukraine and its resources, and north toward Leningrad. His generals protest. Moscow is the key, they argue, the transportation hub, the political center. Take Moscow and the Soviet Union falls. Hitler overrules them. Leningrad is surrounded by September. Hitler orders it starved into submission. For 872 days, the city is besieged. Over 1 million civilians die, mostly from starvation. People eat anything. Wallpaper, paste, leather, each other. It's a horror beyond imagination. But Leningrad doesn't surrender. The horror of this war extends beyond battlefields. By 1942, Nazi Germany is implementing the final solution. At the WWII conference in January, senior Nazis coordinate the systematic murder of European Jews. Extermination camps are built. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, industrial facilities designed for one purpose: mass murder. Jews from across occupied Europe are transported in cattle cars to these camps. Upon arrival, most are sent immediately to gas chambers disguised as showers. Those selected for work labor until they die from exhaustion, starvation, or disease. The scale is unprecedented. Thousands killed daily. Bodies burned in crematoria or pits. Ashes scattered. The Nazis try to make millions of people disappear without trace. It's not just Jews. Roma, Slavic civilians, Soviet prisoners of war, political opponents, homosexuals, the disabled, anyone the regime considers undesirable. In the occupied Soviet Union, special units follow the army, rounding up and shooting Jews. At Babi Yar near Kiev, over 33,000 Jews are machine-gunned and buried in a ravine in 2 days. This genocide happens while the war rages. The two are connected. Hitler believes he's fighting an existential racial war. Conquest and extermination are two sides of the same coin. Most Germans know something terrible is happening. Some actively participate. Most remain silent, either unwilling to see or too afraid to speak. Meanwhile, the military situation begins to shift. In June 1942, American and Japanese navies fight the Battle of Midway. American codebreakers give the U.S. fleet a critical advantage. For Japanese aircraft carriers are sunk. Japan's naval dominance is broken. It's a turning point in the Pacific. In North Africa, the British finally stop Rommel at El Alamein in October. A new British general, Montgomery, wins a defensive battle, then a decisive offensive. Rommel is pushed back across Libya. In November, American forces land in Morocco and Algeria. Operation Torch. Rommel faces enemies from two directions. By May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrender. 250,000 prisoners taken. But the biggest battle is at Stalingrad. Hitler insists on capturing this city on the Volga, partly because it bears Stalin's name. German forces enter the city in September. Urban combat. Building to building, room to room, the Soviets defend with desperate intensity. Both sides take horrific casualties. By November, the German Sixth Army is deep in Stalingrad but exhausted. Then the Soviets counterattack. Operation Uranus. Soviet forces break through Romanian positions north and south of the city. Within days, the entire Sixth Army is encircled. Over 250,000 men trapped. Hitler forbids retreat. He promises air supply. It's impossible. The Luftwaffe can't deliver enough. Inside the pocket, German soldiers freeze and starve. In January 1943, the survivors surrender. Only 90,000 men remain from an army of 250,000. Most will die in Soviet captivity. It's the worst German defeat of the war. The psychological impact is immense. Germany isn't invincible. The strategic initiative has shifted. Germany is now reacting, not dictating. In July 1943, Hitler tries one more offensive at Kursk. It's the largest tank battle in history. The Soviets know it's coming and prepare massive defenses. The German attack fails with heavy losses. After Kursk, Germany never again launches a strategic offensive in the east. From here, it's constant retreat. In Italy, things are also going wrong for the Axis. In July, the Allies invade Sicily. Italian resistance collapses. Mussolini is overthrown. The new Italian government secretly negotiates surrender. When it's announced in September, German forces occupy Italy. Mussolini is rescued by German commandos. Italy descends into civil war. German occupation, resistance, Allied forces fighting up the peninsula. It's a grinding campaign. By 1944, Germany faces disaster on every front. In the east, the Red Army is advancing steadily. Soviet forces are larger, better equipped, and better led than in 1941. The Soviet Union has moved factories beyond the Urals. They're outproducing Germany in tanks, aircraft, artillery. American Lend-Lease supplies trucks, food, raw materials. The Soviet war machine is hitting its stride. The Western Allies are preparing something massive. Everyone knows an invasion of France is coming. The question is where and when. Hitler fortifies the Atlantic coast. The Atlantic Wall. Concrete bunkers. Beach obstacles. Minefields. Rommel is put in charge of defenses. He knows that if the Allies establish a beachhead, Germany can't push them back. Everything depends on defeating them at the water's edge. The Allies choose Normandy. Operation Overlord. The largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, over 150,000 troops land on 5 beaches. Naval and air bombardment precede them. Paratroopers drop inland to secure key positions. At Omaha Beach, American forces face withering fire and take terrible casualties. For hours, the landing teeters on failure. But courage and determination win through. By day's end, a foothold is secured. The Normandy campaign is brutal. Hedgerow country. Each field is a fortress. The Germans defend stubbornly. But Allied air superiority is overwhelming. German movements by day invite destruction from above. Supply lines are constantly hit. In July, American forces break out at St. Lo. By August, Allied forces are racing across France. On August 25th, Paris is liberated. De Gaulle returns in triumph. But the war isn't over. In September, Montgomery tries to end it with a bold airborne operation. Market Garden. Paratroopers will seize bridges in Holland. Armored columns will race through to Germany. It fails at Arnhem. The bridge too far. The war will continue into 1945. In the east, the Red Army launches a massive summer offensive. Operation Bag Ration. It destroys Army Group Center. Over 300,000 German casualties. The advance reaches Poland. By August, Soviet forces are at the outskirts of Warsaw. The Polish Home Army rises against the Germans, expecting Soviet help. Stalin deliberately holds his forces back. He wants the non-communist Polish resistance destroyed. The Germans crush the uprising. Warsaw is leveled. Over 200,000 Poles die. Stalin watches, cynically allowing the Germans to do his dirty work. In December, Hitler launches a last desperate offensive in the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge. German forces achieve surprise and push a bulge into American lines. For a few days, it looks dangerous. Then American forces hold, weather clears allowing air support, and the offensive stalls. By January, the bulge is eliminated. Germany has wasted precious reserves for nothing. The Reich is shrinking. Allied bombers are destroying German cities. Dresden, Hamburg, Cologne, strategic targets and civilian areas. The distinction blurs. Hundreds of thousands die in firestorms. German industrial production continues longer than expected, but the end is inevitable. In the East, on January 12, 1945, the Soviets launch their final offensive. They outnumber the Germans massively. Within weeks, they're in Germany proper. East Prussia is overrun. Millions of German civilians flee west ahead of the Red Army. Horror stories spread about what Soviet troops do to Germans. Much of it is revenge for what Germans did in Russia. The cycle of atrocity continues. In April, Soviet forces reach Berlin. Hitler refuses to leave. The city is defended street by street. Soviet losses are enormous, but they keep coming. Hitler youth and old men in Volkssturm units fight hopelessly. By April 30th, Soviet forces are blocks from the Führer bunker. That day, Hitler commits suicide. His body is burned in the garden. On May 7th, Germany surrenders unconditionally. The European war is over. Even with Germany defeated, the war continues in Asia. Japan has lost most of her conquests but refuses to surrender. The American strategy is island hopping. Bypass strong points. Take key islands. Move closer to Japan. Each island is hell. Iwo Jima, Okinawa, fanatical Japanese resistance, kamikaze attacks, civilians committing suicide rather than surrender. American casualties mount into tens of thousands. The closer to Japan, the fiercer the resistance. Invasion of the home islands will be necessary. American planners estimate it could cost 1 million casualties. Japan shows no sign of giving up. The military still controls the government. They talk of fighting to the last Japanese. But America has a new weapon. In July, in the New Mexico desert, the first atomic bomb is tested. The Manhattan Project. Years of secret work. Thousands of scientists. $2 billion. The test succeeds beyond expectations. A sunbright flash. A mushroom cloud. The earth shaking. When Oppenheimer sees it, he recalls the Hindu scripture. Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. The new American president, Truman, faces a decision. Use the bomb or invade. He chooses the bomb. On August 6th, AB 29 named Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. In an instant, 70,000 people die. Most of the city is destroyed. Survivors describe shadows burned into walls. Skin hanging from bodies. People walking like ghosts, arms outstretched. Those close to the hypocenter simply vanished, turned to ash and shadow. Japan doesn't surrender. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb destroys Nagasaki. Another 40,000 dead instantly. Tens of thousands more will die slowly from radiation. The same day, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and invades Manchuria. Soviet forces overwhelm the Japanese army there. Japan faces enemies from all sides. Nuclear weapons. Soviet invasion. No hope of victory. Even then, military hardliners want to continue. They attempt a coup to prevent surrender. It fails. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito addresses the nation by radio. Most Japanese have never heard his voice. He announces that Japan must endure the unendurable and suffer the insufferable. Japan will surrender. Across the Japanese empire, soldiers weep. Some commit suicide. But the war is over. The formal surrender ceremony is on September 2nd, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The Second World War has ended. 6 years. 50 million dead, maybe more. The exact number will never be known. The Soviet Union lost 27 million. Poland lost 17% of its population. China lost anywhere from 15 to 20 million. Germany lost 7 million. Japan lost 3 million. Numbers that numb the mind. Cities across Europe and Asia are rubble. Economies destroyed. Governments collapsed. Borders redrawn. And hanging over everything, the atomic bomb. War has always been terrible. Now it's potentially apocalyptic. The next world war could be the last, ending civilization itself. The world that emerges from this catastrophe is completely different from the one that entered it. The European colonial empires are finished. Britain and France are exhausted, bankrupt. America and the Soviet Union are superpowers. They were allies against fascism. Now they face each other with mutual suspicion and growing hostility. The Cold War is beginning. Germany is divided into occupation zones. So is Austria, Korea, Vietnam. Everywhere the great powers meet, division. Berlin itself is split. The Iron Curtain, as Churchill will call it, descends across Europe. Eastern Europe falls under Soviet domination. Western Europe becomes part of the American sphere. Japan is occupied by America. The emperor remains but is powerless. Democracy is imposed. The old military caste is purged. Japan will rebuild as a very different nation. The physical destruction is staggering. Dresden is ashes. Tokyo is burned. Warsaw is rubble. Hiroshima is a wasteland. Berlin is shattered ruins where people live in basements. Across Europe and Asia, cities that stood for centuries are gone. Cathedrals destroyed. Ancient libraries burned. Art looted or destroyed. The material heritage of civilization damaged beyond calculation. But deeper than physical destruction is the moral catastrophe. The Holocaust revealed what humans are capable of when restraint is abandoned. The systematic murder of 6 million Jews. Another 5 million Roma, Slavs, disabled, political prisoners. Industrial genocide. The revelation of the concentration camps shocked even hardened soldiers. The films of bulldozers pushing piles of skeletal corpses into mass graves are seared into human consciousness. At Nuremberg, Allied powers try Nazi leaders for crimes against humanity. The concept of crimes against humanity is new. The trials establish that some acts are so heinous they transcend national sovereignty. That following orders is no excuse. Many are executed. Some escape justice. Many lower-level perpetrators slip away or are protected by Cold War calculations. Justice is imperfect. In Japan, similar trials are held. War crimes, the rape of Nanjing, brutal treatment of prisoners, biological warfare experiments. Again, some face justice. Some escape. The emperor is left untouched for political reasons. Is pragmatic but leaves questions about accountability. The survivors carry memories that will haunt them forever. Holocaust survivors with numbered tattoos. Soviet veterans who saw their entire families killed. German civilians who fled west ahead of the Red Army. Japanese civilians scarred by fire and atomic radiation. British children who spent years in shelters during the Blitz. American veterans with nightmares about islands and bombers. Millions of displaced persons wander Europe. Death camps liberated to reveal survivors too weak to walk. Prisoners of war released from years of captivity. Refugees who fled occupation. All trying to find home, or what remains of it. The United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration does what it can. It's not enough. People live in camps for years. Out of this chaos, new institutions are born. The United Nations replacing the failed League of Nations. A forum where nations can talk instead of fight. It's imperfect, often paralyzed by great power politics. But it's something. Along with it come declarations. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Genocide Convention. Attempts to ensure this never happens again. Their aspirations more than guarantees. Europe begins cooperating in new ways. The seeds of what will become the European Union. France and Germany, bitter enemies for generations, begin integration. Coal and steel agreements. Then more. The idea is simple. Make another war between them economically impossible. Bind their economies together. It works. For the first time in centuries, Western Europe isn't preparing to fight itself. America implements the Marshall Plan, pumping billions into European reconstruction. It's partly humanitarian, partly strategic. A prosperous Europe won't fall to communism, but it works. Within a decade, Western Europe is rebuilding, economies recovering. The contrast with the Soviet-dominated East becomes stark. Knowledge survived and dispersed. Nazi scientists flee to America and the Soviet Union. Rocket technology, jet engines. Both superpowers grab what they can. It accelerates Cold War competition. Within decades, men will walk on the moon. Technologies developed for destruction repurposed for advancement. Medical knowledge advanced too grimly. What was learned about trauma treatment, antibiotics, surgical techniques, saves lives afterward. Even knowledge gained through Nazi medical experiments, though ethically horrifying, sometimes proves useful. It raises uncomfortable questions about using data from crimes. The war never really ended. It transformed into different conflicts. The Cold War, the division of Europe, proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, across the developing world. Superpowers never fighting directly because now war means nuclear annihilation, but fighting through others. The war's legacy haunts everything. In Germany, dealing with the past becomes a national obsession. Vergangen Heitsbewältigung, coming to terms with history. Germans build memorials to their victims. They teach the Holocaust in schools. They don't glorify military tradition. It's an ongoing process of confronting the darkest chapter of their history. Not perfectly, but more honestly than many nations face their pasts. In Japan, the reckoning is more complicated. Yes, there are apologies. Yes, there are acknowledgments of aggression, but also ambiguity. Visiting shrines to war dead that include convicted war criminals. Textbooks that downplay atrocities. Political leaders making statements that anger neighboring countries. The debate over memory continues. In America, the war became the good war. Justified. Heroic. The greatest generation. There's truth in this. America did help defeat fascism. But the narrative glosses over complexity. Internment of Japanese Americans. Segregation in the military. Firebombing cities. Atomic weapons on civilians. The war was necessary doesn't mean everything done was right. The Soviet Union used the Great Patriotic War as a foundational myth. Soviet sacrifice saved the world from fascism. The 27 million dead proof of Soviet heroism. This narrative served political purposes but also held real meaning for those who lived it. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the war remained one thing Russians could be proud of. Victory Day parades continue. For Jewish people, the Holocaust is the ultimate catastrophe and turning point. Never again becomes a principle. The State of Israel is founded partly as a response. A place where Jews control their own fate. The debate over lessons from the Holocaust continues. How do you remember without instrumentalizing? How do you honor victims while not treating them as mere symbols? Decolonization accelerates after the war. European powers are too weak to hold empires. India gains independence, then Indonesia, then across Africa. The process is messy, often violent. Borders drawn arbitrarily during colonialism create problems that persist. But the age of European empires is finished. The war killed them. The technologies of war reshape civilian life. Radar becomes air traffic control. Rockets become space exploration. Nuclear fission becomes nuclear power. Computers, developed for ballistics and code breaking, transform everything. The internet begins as a military communication system. The line between military and civilian technology blurs. The war created a vast historical industry. Countless books, documentaries, museums. The Imperial War Museum, Yad Vashem, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. These institutions preserve memory, educate new generations. They fight forgetting and denial. As survivors die, these institutions become custodians of memory. Revisionism and denial emerge. Some claim the Holocaust is exaggerated or fabricated. They're wrong and malicious, but they gain audiences. Some in Japan deny the scale of atrocities in China. Some rehabilitate the Wehrmacht as clean compared to the SS, ignoring their complicity. Historical debate is healthy. Denial and relativization are not. Popular culture endlessly returns to the war. Films from The Great Escape to Schindler's List. Video games. Novels. Some trivialize. Some illuminate. The war provides clear moral contrasts, making it attractive for storytelling. But reality was more complex than stories usually show. For those who lived through it, the war defined them. Nothing afterward compared. Many refused to speak about it for decades. Others couldn't stop. Survivors carry guilt. Why did I live when others died? Veterans carry memories of things they saw and did. The psychological toll is immeasurable. Our understanding of the war continues to evolve. Archives opened after the Cold War reveal new information. Soviet files showing Stalin's calculations and paranoia. German military records. Decoded Japanese communications. Each revelation adds complexity. Oral histories become crucial as the generation that lived the war passes. Projects record testimonies from survivors, veterans, civilians. Their voices add human dimension to statistics. 1 million dead is a statistic. One person's story is relatable tragedy. These testimonies ensure that as memory fades, some record remains. Archaeological work reveals forgotten battlefields. Mass graves in Eastern Europe. The scattered remains of soldiers on Pacific islands. Each discovery reminds us that the past isn't past. It's literally beneath our feet. Debates continue over decisions made. Was strategic bombing of cities necessary or simply terror? Could the atomic bombs have been avoided? Should the Allies have done more to bomb Auschwitz? There are arguments on multiple sides. History doesn't provide simple answers. The role of intelligence is still being understood. Bletchley Park breaking enigma shortened the war significantly. The Manhattan Project succeeded partly through incredible espionage. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor succeeded despite warning signs being missed. Intelligence shaped outcomes more than once realized. Resistance movements receive more attention. French resistance, Polish Home Army, Yugoslav partisans, Norwegian resistance. Often overshadowed by conventional military history, their role was significant. They tied down occupying forces, provided intelligence, kept hope alive. But they also faced moral dilemmas. When is violence justified? How much civilian suffering is acceptable for military goals? Collaborators and gray zones receive more honest examination. Not everyone who lived under occupation was resistance or collaborator. Most were trying to survive. Where's the line between surviving and collaborating? It's not always clear. This doesn't excuse genuine collaboration but recognizes complexity. Women's roles are increasingly recognized. They weren't just waiting at home. Soviet women fought as snipers and pilots. British and American women worked in factories and military support roles. French women were in resistance. German women ran the home front and staffed concentration camps. Gender wasn't a simple divide between combatants and non-combatants. Minority experiences receive belated attention. African American soldiers fighting for a country that segregated them. Colonial troops from India and Africa fighting for empires that ruled them. Their contributions were essential but often unrecognized in popular narratives focused on white soldiers from major powers. The war's global nature is emphasized more. It wasn't just Europe and the Pacific. North Africa, the Middle East, the Atlantic, Arctic convoys to Soviet ports, battles in Ethiopia, Burma campaign, merchant ships sunk everywhere. The conflict touched every corner of the world. Indigenous peoples were affected despite having no stake in the underlying conflicts. Questions about inevitability arise. Was this war unavoidable after the First World War's flawed settlement? Or were there moments it could have been prevented? If Hitler had been stopped at the Rhineland in 1936? If appeasement had ended at Austria? Historians debate counterfactuals. They don't change what happened but illuminate decision points. Technological developments get constant analysis. The failure of French tanks despite numerical superiority. German operational excellence versus Allied material dominance. Japanese carrier tactics. American logistics. Soviet tank design. Military history enthusiasts endlessly debate technical details. It matters because it shows that technology alone doesn't determine outcomes. How it's used matters more. The Holocaust's uniqueness is debated. Was it categorically different from other genocides? Or part of a grim pattern of mass murder that includes the Armenian genocide, Cambodia, Rwanda? Acknowledging uniqueness while recognizing parallels helps understand both what happened and what continues to happen. What does this war tell us about human nature? Nothing comforting. We're capable of extraordinary courage and horrific cruelty, often in the same person. Soldiers who fought bravely also committed atrocities. Civilians who sheltered Jews also looked away from persecution. We contain multitudes. Context matters enormously. The war shows how quickly civilization can collapse. Germany was cultured, educated, home of philosophers and musicians. Within years, it became a genocidal state. The lesson is uncomfortable. No society is immune to barbarism. Education and culture aren't shields against moral collapse. When tribalism, economic desperation, and charismatic evil leadership combine, terrible things become possible. Power unchecked leads to catastrophe. Hitler faced no meaningful internal opposition once he consolidated control. Stalin's paranoia went unchallenged. The Japanese military dominated civilian government. These weren't accidents. Systems that concentrate power without accountability create conditions for disaster. Democracy, with its messy compromises and limitations on power, exists for good reason. The danger of dehumanization cannot be overstated. Once you convince people that others are subhuman, vermin, threats to existence, you remove moral restraint. Nazi propaganda portrayed Jews as disease. Japanese propaganda portrayed Chinese as lesser beings. American propaganda portrayed Japanese as monkeys. Dehumanization makes atrocity easier. Recognizing the humanity in everyone, even enemies, is a moral necessity, not a weakness. Economic desperation creates openings for extremism. The Great Depression devastated Germany. People losing everything become willing to embrace radical solutions. This isn't excuse, but explanation. Stable societies with reasonable prosperity and opportunity are less vulnerable to demagogues promising easy answers to complex problems. The importance of truth and free press becomes clear. In totalitarian states, propaganda replaced reality. People couldn't access accurate information. They were fed lies constantly. Without ability to verify facts, populations are easily manipulated. Free press, despite its flaws and biases, provides essential function. When truth dies, terrible things follow. Individual choices matter even in vast historical forces. Soldiers who refused to shoot civilians, officials who warned Jews. Or imagine standing in Hiroshima today. The city is rebuilt, modern, alive. But in Peace Memorial Park, the ruined dome stands preserved. A skeletal building, frozen in that terrible moment. Children run nearby. Couples walk. Life continues. But the dome remains, refusing to let anyone forget. This is what we're left with. Memories in stone and story. Numbers too large to comprehend. And questions that never fully resolve. We study this war not because we understand it, but because we must try. Because the moment we stop asking why it happened is the moment we become vulnerable to it happening again. 80 years on, the generation that fought is nearly gone. Soon, no living memory will remain. The war will become pure history, something in books rather than lived experience. This makes our responsibility greater. We become the keepers of memory, the ones who must ensure their sacrifices and suffering weren't in vain. What do we take from all this death and destruction? Not that humans are naturally evil. We've also seen extraordinary compassion. Not that war is inevitable. We've seen decades of peace in places that were battlefields. What we should take is awareness. Awareness of how fragile civilization is. How easily demagogues exploit fear. How quickly neighbors become enemies when tribalism is weaponized. We should take humility. The people who allowed fascism to rise weren't idiots. They were humans like us, facing economic crisis, offered simple solutions to complex problems. We like to think we'd have resisted. Maybe, but probably we'd have been like most people, trying to survive, going along. Not heroes, not villains, just human. The atomic age began in this war. We now possess the means to destroy ourselves completely. The next World War might be the last. This makes the lessons of the Second World War more urgent, not less. We cannot afford another conflict on this scale. The stakes are existential now. But there's also hope in this story. The world that emerged from the war, while imperfect, is better in many ways than what came before. More democratic, more committed to human rights, at least in principle. More economically interconnected, making war between major powers increasingly irrational. The European Union, whatever its flaws, is a peace project. It's worked. France and Germany don't prepare to fight each other. That's remarkable. The memorials scattered across the world serve different purposes. Some honor the dead. Some acknowledge crimes.